In the spirit of Form's all-nighter event, where you have to produce a full song in 24 hours, I decided to take it upon me to listen to the entire Art by Form discography in 24 hours. And for those of you who are curious, the discography length is 23 hours and 9 minutes, which means I did it. Unfortunately for anyone else who wants to take on that challenge, it is no longer possible because as of the 9th volume of their all-nighter event, the discography is now 25 hours, 40 minutes, and 9 seconds. So suck on that, losers. Also, if y'all don't know, this year I actually made it onto the comp with my good friends under the Simulcats super group with our track Go Ahead, I Insist. If y'all haven't checked it out, stream it everywhere. I'm using their beautiful artwork and my animation for it in the background. But yeah, huge shout out to Eswyn, Complexive, Vedra, and DJ, and I emphasize this heavily, not SKYBREAK. Form is one of the few record labels, or I guess collectives in this case, that actually has a autobiography. So I'm looking forward to reading this because most of the others don't really have one. But if y'all don't know what Form is an online community founded in July 2018 that strives to create an inviting atmosphere for artists of all mediums to share, collaborate, discuss, and to showcase their work. Through our various compilations and showcases, we've raised tens of thousands of dollars for charities, hosted a diverse set of events, both online and in person, and released hundreds of songs and a variety of physical items. The one thing that sets apart Form from any other marathon that I have done before is that unlike every other record label, Form is a federally registered charity. We are a federally tax-exempt public charity under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. You can make a tax-deductible donation directly to support Form's operations here. 100% of the donations go directly toward our operational expenses and events. You can also read more about our charitable status, including our public, organized, and tax documents. And yeah, if you click read more, you'll see it's the real deal. All of the official information, documents, and whatnot. Although while the music industry is probably one of the hardest ways to make money to then donate to charity, it is a very valiant and honorable cause to do so, which is why so many people thoroughly enjoy all of Form's events. Then that's a very important keynote to consider because unlike most record labels where they would have a release schedule, lots of singles, particular artists that they will curate, Form has very infrequent releases. The bulk of the releases are compilations. The Form website also has a very beautiful events tab. If y'all wanted to check it out, you can see all of the different types of compilations that they've done. While in total they've released 462 songs to date, when it comes down to the actual number of releases, it comes down to just 16 because all of them are compilations. No singles, no EPs, no remix EPs. I mean, technically there's a remix comp with 4 songs, which I guess is EP sized, but I categorize it as a compilation. There is also a VIP compilation, but that's besides the point. For that reason, Form is very exclusive, but in a very different way than most other record labels. While some are very exclusive in that you have to produce a very particular genre, or you have to be particularly very well known, successful, invite only, etc., Form is very exclusive in the way that even though they are a particularly underground label, to participate, it's not like you just send out a song, but there's generally a prompt included with that song. And some of these prompts are admittedly a challenge, such as the all-nighter compilations that I had mentioned earlier, where you have to produce a whole song in 24 hours. While the first couple of compilations, I was listening to them and thinking, yeah, I could see how this song was made in 24 hours. Once you reach compilation 5 and 6 and onwards, you start to realize, wow, they made that in 24 hours. One of the very interesting things for myself is not only in at least regards to the all-nighter compilations where the songs are all made in 24 hours, the behind-the-scenes process for curating the track list, getting the artwork, getting all the socials ready for the distribution of it, while they give themselves 72 hours, they oftentimes already have the ball rolling even less than that. So while some compilations and album rollouts and releases can take weeks, months, sometimes even years, Art by Form does releases very infrequently, but when they do, it happens super quickly. A couple of the other compilation formats that is worth shouting out is the Storybook series as well as Any%. Any% is basically the same thing as the All-Nighter series, but you have 16 hours and you are limited to 50-second to 1-minute 10-second tracks. Whereas Storybook is a very interesting series, but they pair up script writers, graphic designers, and music producers to create an artwork, a story, and a soundtrack or a song to go along with it. When I'm doing these marathons, normally within the first 30 seconds, and if I skip around a little bit first drop, you can get a tell for if you're going to enjoy the rest of the song or if it's not going to be worth continuing to listen to. The thing with Storybook, however, is that completely flipped it on its head because I couldn't just skip the entire song if I didn't like it. For these Storybook compilations, I really wanted to stay true to the concept, so I read all of the stories, and there are a lot of stories. So much so that I ended up listening to some of these songs like 15 times over while reading the stories, just to really get a concept and grapple with the body of work that I was presented with. Some genuinely very insightful and cool pieces of work that are made there. But aside from music, artbyFORM has also done live events, and they've also done print media. While this video is mostly focusing on the music, the one thing I want to highlight with the print media is that I actually participated in a Form project before the all-nighter track. I never actually acknowledged it anywhere, but Formzine. Formzine is a body of work where people in the community were able to submit artworks and magazine spreads, hence Formzine. And I actually made it on this. I made it on this with my buddy Foley. I never really acknowledged it anywhere. I didn't find a good time or rhyme or reason to, so I might as well. Big shouts out to Form. You can't buy this book anymore, but I will include the artwork somewhere on the screen where you guys can enjoy it. Basically, it was a compilation of photographs that I had taken, and my buddy Foley made the artwork kind of encompassing the whole thing. If you guys also don't know who Foley is, Foley also made my current music logo and my YouTube Red Panda icon, so huge shouts. Just gonna show this one more time. The last thing I'll throw in about the record label before I go into the nitty-gritty and the stats is that a running theme with some of the record labels that I've done recently is that normally when there are more artists than music to account for said number of artists on the record label, that's often indicative of something negative. Not always. In the case of Elysian Records, for example, they had way more artists than the number of tracks that had debuted on the label, and because of that, the sentiment that I got was that there were too many faces that were coming and going, and it lent to not a lot of staying power for some of these artists or songs. This is also the case for Heaven Sent, and while I think the feeling is kind of similar, it's a bit different in that there's a lot of main artists that are mainstays to the label, but then as for the featuring artists, that tends to be a revolving door. If I'm going to use the example of Slander, they've probably made like 5 to 10 tracks on that record label, but every single track will have a different featuring artist, so it kind of inflates the numbers in that regard. Form is the logical extrapolation to this phenomenon, because while I did mention that they've only had 462 songs, they have had 653 artists that I could find. You see, while most artists back in the day would just be credited as their main alias, it's become a theme ever since their Telephone series, where they got a bunch of producers into groups blindly to produce a song together. And instead of crediting every single artist, they had created like stage names, for lack of better words. For example, 213-do-u-feel is a collaborative alias with SCOTUS, Puddle, XVNA, Rev, Linker, and Wednesday. This is even more so the case with their VIP series Redialed, where they had a, I believe, 45 artist collaboration that was credited under Megaphone. Even before that series, there are a couple collaborative aliases like On God and Formhampton, but since then, we've also had the likes of the Winamp Boys, Equity, The Flip Zone, Webcage, Six Impala, Lightbenders, Yukai Sound Team, Dubstep 2, Small House in Spain, and the Simulcats, of course, to name a few. While logically it would make sense to only credit the group alias, the reason it became a bit difficult was because when I was going through all of the SoundCloud uploads, they would credit the supergroup alias, but then they would also sometimes credit all of the individuals from the alias that participated in it. And so in that regard, after tediously going through every single upload, 653 was the number of artists that I got to. Now that said, it's very possible that there's way more that I couldn't account for, but it is really interesting seeing in context of the entire record label's history that they really do interact with so many different artists. And in this case, it's a very stark contrast to how with Elysian and with Heaven Sent, having a lot of names coming and going is a detriment to the label, whereas with Form, it's a much bigger picture and conversation of just how much of a positive movement all of these people coming together to make these charity compilations for such a great causes. Last but not least, do I recommend marathoning the artbyFORM discography? And And my personal recommendation is a yes. I thoroughly enjoyed going through all the compilations. Even though it was 462 songs, it did not feel at all as tedious or as tiring as some of my other marathons. And I think the reason for that is, you see, while there are 462 songs, there are only 16 compilations. So in that regard, it's a lot easier to compartmentalize that. Like, instead of thinking, oh, I have another 100 songs to go through, it's like, oh, I just need to finish this compilation. And with each year approximately having 2 to 3 compilations, it's really easy to see the passage of time and your progression in a discography. Yo, what's up, y'all? Me from the future. I realized I forgot to mention that just like I do with every other marathon discography video, I have a playlist in the description down below if y'all want to hear my most favorite form tunes, but also perhaps some of the best ones that I found during the discography marathon. Also want to mention that if y'all like any of the form tracks, y'all should consider buying the music from Bandcamp. The money that they make from music purchases goes to the operations of the label, and I personally just bought the entire form discography for I think like 80 USD. So it was a good deal. I'm looking forward to using the music in my mixes, and maybe even in a best of form mix if y'all are interested in something like that. Anyways, back to the video. Anyways, let's get to the stats. So as I mentioned, they have only ever released compilations, and that is amount to 16 compilations. None of them have catalog codes, but I did fill in catalog codes for the all-nighter compilation because on the 4th album cover, if I'm not mistaken, nope, I'm mistaken, the 6th artwork has a code on it, which I think is unofficial, but I decided to extrapolate that code for all the other ones, so FRM-AN-00 and then digit. The shortest song on form is Eswyn's Perfectly You, which comes out to 50 seconds, which in hindsight is really interesting because, as I mentioned earlier with the Any Percent compilation, the goal of it was to make a song in 16 hours with a minimum duration of 50 seconds or a maximum duration of 1 minute and 10 seconds. And of the 65 songs in that compilation, only one song hit the 50-second mark, which was Eswyn, as opposed to the 13 songs that came in at 1 minute and 10 seconds. Shouts out to those 13, they really maximized those 1 minute and 10 seconds. On the other end of the spectrum, however, we have 4 songs that break the 8-minute mark, but the longest song is Rural Internet Crash Blossom featuring PK, Shellboy, ILYSM, AOL, Saturna Ultra, and Rockin' Riley at 8 minutes and 52 seconds. If you were to take the entire discography and average it, it would come out to 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Which means that if you wanted to listen to the most average length song, you could either listen to Linear Tragedy by 1OK, Sleeping on the Ceiling by Nabita, or Wait Any Longer by Sourest Dream. Now let's talk about the artists. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I credited every single artist, even from these mega groups, as individual artists. So for the 31 group or super group aliases, I only credited them as half an alias. So if we wanted to play on semantics, we have had 684 aliases on form. But as for individual artists and writers, I decided to just go by that metric and left it at 653. The artists with the most features are 2 of them tied for second, that being Aliotic and Clovehitch. There have been 84 artists that have been credited with a remix, but only one remix, so not particularly interesting. Now, with my whole conversation about how exclusive form is, I think this will be a statistic that'll be very interesting to anybody watching, but the artists with the most tracks on artbyFORM goes to DossyX with 11 tracks on form. Circuit Hour and Adri come in second with 10 tracks. Eliderp and Wintercolor come in third with 9 tracks. Hallow, SKYBREAK, also known as allegedly DJ Not SKYBREAK, and Catnaps come in fourth with 8 tracks. And BH, I'd Rather Not, Stardew, Yandril, and Mizu come in fifth with 7 tracks. I'll include an extended list on the screen somewhere. As for the number of appearances, however, the leaderboards slightly change, with Circuit Hour coming in first with 13 appearances and DossyX coming in second with 12 appearances. I'm not going to go through the entire list, I'll include a screenshot on the screen, but one of the things I will point out is Underscores with 8 appearances, as well as Noir, Zook, 360, Zimi, Bendel, Convexity, Yuffie, formerly known as Euphorian, and Shalbert with 7 appearances. So big shouts to them. Anyways, that's going to be it for me. Hope y'all enjoyed. Stream Simulcats, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye-bye.